I remember the moment I began to wonder if God was real, not in the way I'd been taught, but in a way that could be felt. It wasn't during a prayer, or in a church, or under any grand revelation. It was late at night, alone, when the noise of the world had finally quieted. I sat by my window watching the streetlights blur in the rain, and for the first time I felt an ache that words couldn't hold. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was something deeper, a yearning, a whisper that said, "There is more than this." And yet, that whisper was followed by silence. I remember thinking, if there is a God, why does he hide? Why does he wait until the heart is breaking to speak? For years, I looked for answers in all the usual places, in books, philosophies, in conversations that reached nowhere. I listened to people who claimed to know the truth, but their certainty felt hollow, like someone describing the ocean from a photograph. I wanted to feel it, the living presence, the undeniable pulse that makes existence more than accident. But life went on, ordinary and repetitive, filled with plans and distractions. Days turned into patterns, and I almost forgot that question. Almost. Because sometimes in the spaces between thoughts, in the stillness before sleep, I could sense it, that faint awareness just beyond the edge of perception, watching, waiting. It wasn't until I stopped searching that something began to shift. One morning, as sunlight spilled across the floor, I noticed the dust floating in the air, tiny particles dancing in light, invisible until the light revealed them. In that quiet moment, I felt something open inside me. It wasn't an answer. It was a recognition that maybe God is like that light, always here, but unseen until you are still enough to notice. And suddenly the world around me seemed different, not magical, but profoundly alive. The sound of birds outside the window, the warmth of my breath, the way time seemed to pause for no reason. Everything was saying something, though no words were spoken. For a while, I thought I was losing my mind. How could the ordinary feel so vast, so intimate? How could a simple morning carry the weight of eternity? Yet it wasn't madness, it was clarity. I began to see that life itself was the language of the divine, not in symbols or scripture, but in direct experience. Every face, every sound, every passing moment was God trying to be seen through countless disguises. The problem wasn't that God was absent. It was that I had been too busy, too certain, too distracted to see. I started to notice how easily we live asleep. We rush from one thing to another, filling silence with noise, fearing the empty spaces that might reveal too much. We talk about God, argue about God, but we rarely stop long enough to feel what that word truly points to. Because to feel it means to surrender control. And surrender feels like death to the self we've spent a lifetime building. We crave divine presence, but we resist the stillness where that presence lives. We ask for signs, but we're afraid of what might happen if they actually appear. The truth began to unfold slowly. God doesn't come when you call. God appears when you're truly ready to be undone. When the layers of who you think you are start to crumble, when every belief you cling to begins to dissolve, when there's nothing left to protect, that's when the silence becomes alive. That's when presence fills the emptiness. It doesn't arrive with thunder or visions. It arrives like breath unnoticed until everything else falls quiet. I remember sitting in that silence one evening, feeling stripped of every idea I'd ever had about faith. I wasn't praying anymore. I wasn't asking for anything. I was simply there, raw, uncertain, but deeply aware. And then it happened. Not an appearance, not a voice, not even a feeling. Just the pure knowing that I was not alone and never had been. It was as if something vast and tender had always been beside me, waiting for me to stop pretending I could find it. And in that moment I understood God hides in plain sight, concealed not by distance but by our unwillingness to be still. After that, life changed not in what I did, but in how I saw. Every person became a reflection, every moment a quiet meeting. I began to see that the divine doesn't demand devotion, only attention. You don't have to believe in God for God to be real. You only have to look deeply enough into what already is. The wind, the heartbeat, the eyes of a stranger, each is a doorway waiting for you to notice what's been here all along. But awakening isn't blissful at first. It's disorienting. You realize how much of life you've lived half asleep. The comfort of ignorance begins to slip away, replaced by a raw honesty that burns and heals at the same time. You see how often you've confused comfort for peace, control for faith. The awakening doesn't make you superior, it makes you humble, because you realize that nothing was ever missing. The divine never withheld itself. You were just not ready to see. And that's the paradox. God appears only when you no longer demand proof, when you've been emptied of certainty, when you stop trying to summon the sacred like a servant. Only then does grace reveal itself quietly, tenderly, like a presence that has been waiting forever for you to remember. Awakening feels like both liberation and exile. You feel light, yet you know you can never fully return to the blindness that once kept you safe. You carry the weight of seeing clearly, and the beauty of knowing that everything you see, every single thing, is God in disguise. When the first light of awareness breaks through, the world you once trusted begins to look strange. Everything that seemed so stable, your beliefs, your ambitions, your relationships, starts to shimmer like a mirage. You realize that the life you've been living is not reality itself, but a version of it shaped by countless hands, each one passing down stories, values, and fears. The world isn't built from truth. It's built from agreement. From the moment we're born, we're taught what's important, what's dangerous, what's sacred, and what's forbidden. We inherit a script before we even know how to question it. And we perform our roles so convincingly that we forget we're acting at all. I began to see that so much of what we call reality is simply a collection of habits. Habits of thought, language, and perception. Time, for example, isn't something you can touch, yet we live as if it owns us. We divide it, chase it, waste it, sell it. We bow to the ticking of the clock as if it were a god. Money is just paper and numbers, yet it determines the rhythm of our existence. We spend our days serving symbols, believing they have power because everyone around us agrees that they do. And the moment someone questions these shared illusions, they're dismissed as lost, naive, or mad. But maybe madness is simply seeing the lie too clearly. It struck me one day how fear maintains the whole structure. People don't cling to illusion because they're foolish. They cling because they're afraid of the unknown. The known world, even if it's painful, feels safer than the mystery beyond it. We trade freedom for familiarity. We build walls of certainty to protect us from the vastness of not knowing. Religion does it, science does it, politics does it. Each offers explanations to shield us from the trembling truth that we do not understand what we are. And yet every so often that mystery leaks through. In a sunset, in a death, in the moment you fall in love and time disappears. Those are the cracks where God breathes. As I looked deeper, I saw how society rewards belief over truth. The child who questions is told to be quiet. The worker who doubts the system is labeled ungrateful. The seeker who sees too far beyond is called crazy. We are trained to fit, not to wake. Schools teach us how to memorize, not how to perceive. Media keeps us entertained so we never have to sit in silence. The machinery of the world depends on our distraction. Because the moment you become still, you start to see, and once you see, you can't be controlled. But seeing clearly is not easy. It's uncomfortable to realize that much of what you called your life was never really yours. You start noticing how people chase symbols of happiness instead of happiness itself. How status replaces meaning. How relationships become performances. It's painful at first to watch people worship shadows and call them light. But then compassion grows. Because you understand you were once doing the same. We all were, and in a way we still are. The dream is deep and beautifully designed. It teaches us through illusion until we are ready to look beyond it. There were days I wished I could go back, to unsee what I'd seen, to enjoy the comfort of believing again. But that door never opens twice. Once you've glimpsed the truth, you can't return to sleep. You live between worlds, one foot in the familiar, one in the infinite. You play your role, go to work, laugh with friends, make plans, but something inside you stays awake. You see the strings behind the puppet show. You see the patterns repeating in history, in people, in yourself. And though it can be heavy, there's also wonder in it. Because you start to realize that even the illusion is part of the divine design. Even the blindness serves the awakening. I began to understand that the veil isn't something God places over us. It's something we weave ourselves. Every belief, every fear, every desire becomes another thread. We cover the infinite with our stories until we forget what's underneath. But the moment we stop defending those stories, even for a second, the veil parts. Reality doesn't change, our seeing does. And in that shift, the divine begins to flicker through everything. It takes courage to stay awake in a sleeping world, to keep your heart open when everyone else is rushing past, to act with gentleness when the world worships power, to speak truth even when it shakes your own foundations. Awakening isn't rebellion, it's remembrance. It's not about rejecting the dream, but recognizing it as a dream and choosing to love it anyway. Because when you finally understand that reality is not a solid wall but a shared vision, you stop fighting it. You begin to play with it. You move through life as both dreamer and dream, knowing that God hides not behind the illusion but within it. And maybe that's the secret. The divine doesn't disappear because we built a false world. It lives through it, waiting for us to look past the surface. God doesn't punish the dreamers. He waits for them to wake, to see that the dream was his way of leading them home. The strange thing about awakening is that it feels like both a blessing and a wound. You start to see life in its totality, the beauty, the suffering, the endless dance of creation and destruction, and yet, in seeing it all, something inside you breaks open. There's no longer a clear boundary between joy and sorrow. You feel everything more deeply than before. The laughter of a stranger on the street can move you to tears, and the sight of pain in another's eyes can feel like your own. But there's also a quiet loneliness that follows, not because the world rejects you, but because you no longer belong to it in the same way. You've stepped out of the play, yet you still walk among the actors. In the beginning, I tried to explain it. I tried to share what I was seeing, how everything we call me or you is just the universe pretending to be separate for a while. But words fail. They turn living truth into concepts, and concepts become cages. You realize that language was built for the dream, not for what lies beyond it. And so, silence becomes your teacher. You learn to listen instead of speak, to observe instead of convince. The deeper you go, the more you understand that awakening is not about knowing more, but about unlearning everything you thought you knew. Yet even in this clarity, a paradox emerges. Freedom can become its own prison. You see through the illusion and feel untouchable, but that can harden into distance. You watch others struggle and want to help, but sometimes your words sound cold, as if you're standing above it all. The ego sneaks back in, disguised as wisdom. It whispers, "You are awake, they are not." And the moment you believe that, you've fallen asleep again, this time in a subtler dream, the dream of being enlightened. There were moments I caught myself there, feeling like I had transcended the noise of the world. But life has a way of humbling even the proudest seeker. The universe doesn't let you stay above it. It brings you back through love, loss, or laughter. A child's curiosity, a stranger's kindness, a mistake that shatters your certainty. These become reminders that awakening isn't about rising above humanity, but sinking fully into it. You learn that to be awake doesn't mean to escape the world. It means to see God in the world exactly as it is, chaos and all. And still, there's the loneliness. It doesn't vanish. You watch people chase illusions you've already seen through the same old dramas of power, pleasure, fear. You can't join them fully anymore, but you also can't pull them out. Everyone wakes at their own pace. That's the hardest truth. You can't awaken someone by force. You can only love them where they are. So you learn patience. You learn tenderness. You learn to see their sleep not as ignorance, but as innocence. Over time, compassion replaces loneliness. You start to understand that the dreamers are not separate from the dream, and the seer is not separate from what is seen. You stop judging those still lost in illusion because you recognize your own reflection in them. The same divine light that opened your eyes is shining behind theirs, just waiting for the right moment to break through. Compassion becomes the bridge back to connection, not through belief, but through being. You begin to laugh more easily. You see how the seriousness of spirituality is another form of ego. Enlightenment isn't heavy, it's playful. The universe itself is a dance of form and emptiness. Every joy, every heartbreak, every beginning and ending is part of the cosmic rhythm. When you stop trying to hold on, life becomes music again. Even pain has its melody. Even silence has its song. I remember one evening sitting alone, watching the sun melt into the horizon. There was no desire to capture it, no urge to make meaning of it, just the stillness of being. And in that stillness, something dissolved the idea of me watching the sunset. There was only light meeting light. That's when I understood the seer and the seen are one. The divine isn't waiting above or beyond, it's experiencing itself through our eyes, through our laughter, through every fleeting moment. So the paradox becomes clear. You awaken to discover there is no awakening. There was never a separate self to begin with. There was only consciousness dreaming itself into form, pretending to forget so it could remember again. And when you truly see that, the loneliness fades into a kind of gentle wonder. You don't need to belong anywhere, because you are everywhere. You don't need to be understood, because you are the understanding itself. And still, you live, you work, you love, you make mistakes. But now every act becomes sacred because you know who's playing. You see the divinity in the mundane, in the laughter of children, in the ache of goodbyes, in the silence between heartbeats. The play goes on, but you no longer resist it. You smile through it, knowing that even the illusion is made of light. At some point, the search for awakening dissolves into something quieter, a soft, steady rhythm that moves beneath all things. You stop reaching for the divine as if it were somewhere else, because you begin to see that it never left. Every breath, every sound, every imperfection is made of the same sacred pulse. The great secret isn't hidden in distant mountains or in the words of teachers. It's in the moment you pour a cup of tea, the warmth of sunlight on your face, the laughter that escapes without reason. God doesn't appear when you conquer the world or renounce it. God appears when you stop pretending you were ever separate from Him. There's a kind of peace that comes when you realize awakening isn't an escape, it's a homecoming. You still feel the sting of life, you still lose people you love, you still make mistakes. But now everything happens inside a larger silence. You don't resist the pain because you sense its purpose. You don't cling to joy because you trust its return. The dance of opposites, birth and death, love and loss, fear and freedom, becomes something you can finally bow to. You stop trying to fix the dream and begin to live beautifully within it. There were days when I believed awakening meant separation, that I had to leave behind the noise of the world to stay pure. But life kept pulling me back through laughter, through hunger, through the smell of rain. And slowly I understood. The divine isn't only found in stillness, it's also in movement. It's in traffic jams and small talk, in dirty dishes and tired eyes. It's in the way someone reaches for your hand without words. When you finally see that everything is God playing hide and seek with Himself, every moment becomes holy. You stop chasing experiences of transcendence because you realize you're already living inside one. This is the return not to the world as it was, but to the world as it truly is. You start living consciously, gently, aware of the invisible thread connecting all things. When someone speaks to you in anger, you don't just hear the words, you feel the fear beneath them. When someone smiles, you see the same light you once sought in temples. Compassion becomes effortless, not because you're trying to be good, but because there's no longer any other left to judge. You see the divine acting through everyone, even those who seem lost, even those who hurt you. You begin to understand why the great mystics smiled so often. They weren't detached from the world, they were in love with it. To them, every mistake was grace in disguise. Every fall was a way back to humility. Every ending was a doorway. You see now that awakening doesn't make you superior or special. It makes you ordinary in the most extraordinary way. You no longer need to preach truth. You live it quietly, through kindness, through presence, through laughter. And life, in its simplicity, becomes sacred again. A conversation becomes prayer. Silence becomes communion. Even the act of breathing feels like a partnership with the divine. You move through the world as though everything were alive, because it is. The trees breathe with you. The sky watches with you. The same consciousness that looks through your eyes looks back from every direction. There's no hierarchy anymore, no better or worse, no high or low, only the shimmering play of the infinite pretending to be many. Sometimes people ask what it means to be ready for God. I think it means being empty enough to receive, humble enough to listen, and brave enough to see that there is no distance between you and the sacred. Readiness isn't about perfection. It's about surrender, letting go of every story you've told yourself about who you are and what the world should be. When you stop insisting, when you stop searching, when you finally stand still, that's when God appears. Not as a vision, not as a thunderous voice, but as the quiet realization that He was never gone. And so, life continues. You laugh, you cry, you lose, you love. But now, everything carries the fragrance of eternity. You no longer fear the unknown because you recognize it as your own reflection. You no longer chase happiness because you've discovered the still joy that doesn't depend on circumstance. The mind softens, the heart opens. The world remains what it is, imperfect, fleeting, beautiful, and that is enough. In the end, awakening isn't about reaching heaven. It's about seeing heaven in everything. You walk through the same streets, speak the same words, but something inside has shifted forever. The divine is no longer an idea, it's the air itself. You find yourself bowing silently to the miracle of existence, to the laughter of a child, to the ache of longing, to the mystery that brought you here and will one day take you home. And maybe that's the final truth. God appears not when you call for Him, but when you are finally quiet enough to notice that He's been here all along, in every breath, in every face, in every fleeting moment of this vast, shimmering dream. You were never waiting for Him. He was waiting for you to wake up, to remember, and to love the dream as part of the truth.